My name is Rainbow Watcher. I'm also known as Joe Jules. My family's the Secwepemc and Secwepemc. The Secwepemc were come out of Tejan and were forced to live in Chuchwa, a place that's now known as Simch First Nation. But my family, 75 members of my family, we were evicted from Tejan on April 16th, 1916 was the last day that our people lived at Tejan Cache. They were forced marched this way, even though the railroad was built by then. They refused to give our people a ride, and they forced us to walk from Tejan down to Chuchwa. Several people tried to turn back and were beaten. A couple of members that died en route, drowning in the river, trying to cross the river on rafts. That was my dad's side, the Secwepemc. They ranged between Jasper House, Alberta. That's about 60 to 70 kilometers past the new town of Jasper. The old town site was known as Jasper House. It was on a confluence of the Snake River and the Athabasca River. That's where our people had wintered inside a Jasper Park. We were evicted out of the park and moved to into Robson area, Lucerne Lake, and then when Robson Park was created, they moved us again to Tejan Cache. Then in 1916, they took the last 75 remaining members of my family up from up there and moved us down here to this part of the valley. It was a trek of great hardship. There were no highways back then, just old trails to follow. And some of the elders and the young children never got down here and situated until midwinter. They arrived frozen and decimated, no food, and were taken in by communities here in Chuchwa and Kamloops. Our people settled there. So that's the history of my family on my dad's side. My mom, Mona Jules, her mom was from the Kamloops band and was Melanie Paul, and her dad was Francis Ignace from Secwepemc. So I come from a long line of hereditary people, hereditary from my dad's side all the way back to Jasper House. Chief Lewis of Jasper House was my dad's great-great-grandfather. My great-grandmother Catherine was Chief Lewis's daughter. On my mom's side, our hereditary lineage goes all the way back to Pakalmuch and Naquala and the Okanagan Secwepemc Confederacy and the Trout Lake Accord. My mom's side of the family directly related through there all the way to the Okanagan. I wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on with Kinder Morgan, and it's really disheartening to have a few people, a few elected officials trying to speak on behalf of the entire Secwepemc Nation. I don't believe that any one band has the right to speak on behalf of the entire nation. And these people are being offered money. And I don't feel right about it because this money is only going to be spent by a few select people. And if there's money that comes from projects like this, it should go out to all of the Secwepemc Nation. And I'm a little annoyed at the process because it amounts to mere pennies on a dollar. These big corporations are going to make billions of dollars moving oil through our territory. And there's a great risk involved with that. You look at how beautiful our territory is. These mountains are pristine. These rivers, abundant with fish. All of these things are at stake. And I think we need to start talking maybe at the United Nations level about how unfair this process is, where only a few of these elected people seem to think they can talk on behalf of 8,000 or 10,000 Secwepemc people. And they'll fill a room with their supporters and maybe get 20 or 30 people to pass a vote in the community that affects 10,000 people. It's not right. We are a nation where no single band or its elected officials have the right to negotiate or through consultation or consent allow any part of our nation to be taken away from our grandchildren's future use and enjoyment of the land and the way we grew up with it. Some of us are still very much connected to the land. We've gone through that process from childhood, our etchkum and our training, where now when they ask, who are you? And I tell them, I'm Secwepemc. I'm a dream of the land. I'm from right there. I come from right there. I point at the land and I explain to them all of those things that we do to become a dream of the land, where we, as Secwepemc people, we believe that we're born into a great moral obligation to one day become dreams of the land. But through that process, to get there, you have to first learn to be to be a guardian of the land itself. Through that whole process and learning, that obligation is fulfilled only after you bring that forward and pass that to your grandchildren. Then that obligation is settled, but you don't just give that to your grandchildren. You teach them along the way as you go with them. You start teaching them very young age their ethical training, showing them how to become dreams of the land, how to fulfill that obligation to become to become a guardian of the land, to a voice to everything. Our belief is we come from that land and everything out there, the root people, the water people, the four-legged ones, the winged ones, the ones that crawl, the ones that fly, all of those ones gave us all of the powers that we as human beings have. We're the most pitiful in all of creation because we depend on everything else to live. We're the only species on earth that does that. That's how pitiful we are. A bear has a simple life. A deer has a simple life. A fish, a moose, a coyote, a wolf, they all have a fairly simple life. It's us who are complicated. It's us who depend on everything else to survive. If we lose one species out there, we become what we call quanquant. We become very pitiful because of it. But you can bet one thing, the moose, the deer, the buffalo, the bear, the wolf, the coyote, the cougar, none of them would suffer if we disappeared tomorrow. If we were gone in a heartbeat, they wouldn't lose a moment's sleep over us. But we exist the way we do. We're told about these things because of the gifts that they say that those ones gave to us long ago. Our ability to think, to plan, to learn, to share with language, the ability to love, to have emotions, to take care of things, all of these things, the ability to communicate, to plan and think, and to dream. Every one of these gifts that the human beings carry, we believe came from out there. Some animal somewhere at one time gave that up for us. That's our belief. That's why we say we come from that one. Because long ago, they say coyote brought us here. Because he heard that one crying, that mother lamenting one day about the special children that were coming. Those children were us. They say coyote. He tricked the transformers into forming us. And then he blew life into us and let us go on the land, and he watched us. And he said, there's something missing. Because he heard the grandmother talk about the beautiful children, how they were. And he started telling the animals, I need the counsel. I need to figure out how we can change this. And then he talked about these things. The animals said, you're talking about all of the gifts that we carry. We love our mother too. So we'll help you. Each one of us will give them something so that they can become better, so that they can become the children that you dreamt of. So all the animals came together and they gave us these powers, the voice. They say the salmon had the most beautiful voice in all of creation. But he gave it to us. He had the most beautiful song, but he gave it to us to sing. You say that he gave us that voice long ago, that voice that we must now use to honor him. When you look at our people and you talk to the elders and you ask them, what do we call that salmon? They'll tell you, Swal'ui. That's our true relative. That's how our people think about that sockeye salmon. Because that's what he gave to us, this voice, this way of sharing. And from that day, we've had an obligation to him and to everything else out there because we became related to them through that process. Because everything gave us something to live. We depend on everything. That's how pitiful we are. That's how weak we are. We depend on everything. So we have a moral obligation now that we talk about as Secwepemc people to look after the land. For those ones there, those sacred ones we see running around us here, these little grandparents running around here someday. Everything that we have, the beauty that we have, they inherit that. It's up to us now not to drop the ball. And if we have to shout and scream at the top of those mountains to make it happen, that's what we have to do. Because we're the only voice that they have, the voice of reason. And we tell the people, there comes a time in life when you have to stop thinking about dollars and cents. You have to start thinking with common sense. And too much of our people are like that. Those leaders, they go in those behind closed door meetings with these proponents of these big projects, like these pipelines, like these mines. Then they play what I call jackass politics. The white man comes in a room with a little stick and a carrot on the end. A proverbial carrot on the end of the stick. The jackasses, the people, they see that carrot, that little bit of money they dangle in front of them. They start chasing that around the room. And around they go in that vicious little circle. Because all they can think about, what can I get for me? And those are the chiefs and councils, and those are the people that are talking on behalf of 10,000 Secwepemc people. And yet there's only a handful of them, maybe 25, 30 supporters. But they think they got the right to stand up and speak on behalf of my grandchildren. I want to let them know that they don't have that right. I didn't give up that right to them. I remember, because I come from a hereditary line, a hereditary lineage. I remember what has to be done for the people. The true leaders of the nation would give everything away for their people. So that's my thoughts and feelings about the land and the water. I have one more story I'd like to tell about my family's experience with Secwepemc Child and Family Services. Right now, I and my wife are fighting for the right to visit our grandchildren. They've been taken away on us. They're with their parents, but we're only allowed supervised visits because they say my wife is too old and too feeble, and she's got asthma and she's got emphysema. She's a very able-bodied woman. But they're picking on me because a few years ago, they took my grandson, 3 months old, away from my daughter because they said he was born with a congenital heart defect. They got the doctor to sign a paper saying that my daughter was unfit. She didn't drink, she didn't do drugs, neither did her boyfriend. They're still together. They have 2 more children. But they took my 3-month-old baby away from her. And they said, she's qualified. She knows how to look after children with special needs. And they said, we will no longer have contact, the mother or the grandparents. No contact. Within 4 to 5 days, my grandson was dead. This so-called professional, this woman who's supposed to know how to look after children with special needs, said, I didn't know what to do. He started screaming and crying and playing strange with me. So I just let him scream and I let him cry because I thought that would be good for his lungs. And I told the doctor, you told me that this woman was a professional, that she knew how to look after this baby. Yet now she's over there admitting she didn't know what to do when the baby started crying. What's wrong with picking him up and comforting him? He was allowed to scream and scream and scream all day. Finally that night, about 11:30 at night, he had cardiac arrest and she phoned the ambulance. And by the time they got back there, they worked on him. They took him to the hospital and the doctor just pronounced him dead. Then we were notified. We rushed to the hospital. They said, something's wrong with your grandson. We rushed up there thinking we were going to be able to see him and he'd be okay, but when we got there, he was gone. My daughter went into hysterics and screamed and screamed and screamed. She had to be sedated and kept in the hospital after this. While they were doing that, in comes Secwepemc Child and Family Services, and they rushed right by us and they went over to the far side of the room where this white woman who'd been the foster parent and only had known the baby for 4 to 5 days. They were over there hugging her and coddling her and offering her counseling and I said something about that. I said, what the hell are you doing over there? How come we don't hear you over here offering any counseling service or family support? The doctor said, oh, here's your child, you can have him back now. And I'm like, we didn't even have visiting rights yesterday. We weren't even allowed to see the baby while he was alive. Now he's dead, we got all the rights in the world. I said, that's pretty cruel, that's pretty heartless of you. We took our grandson home, me and my wife. We took care of him. We did the funeral on our own. We didn't want a priest there, so the band said, well, we're not going to help you with any funds. We said, it's okay. We'll look after him ourselves, our own way. So I buried my grandson. Every year now, to the day he died. Every year, once a year, I get harassed by Secwepemc Child and Family Services. And now, because I've been open and vocal about supporting the fight against Kinder Morgan and my band, they're pro Kinder Morgan. They've already signed a deal. They've already made a money agreement with them. We've informed them that our family owns the northern part of this territory, that they negotiated. I said, you never informed us, you never consulted us or asked about consent or anything. You assumed you had the right to negotiate on behalf of the Chukchakaltem. We're telling you, you don't. Not one of you came and talked to anyone in my family. We spoke out against this pipeline, and it seems like the harassment with Secwepemc Child and Family Services has gotten worse again because we chose to be political, to speak up against the band's jackass politics. So here we are again, all these years later, still being told we are not allowed to have unsupervised visits with our grandchildren. Any little rumor, they come, they phone, harass us. My son and my daughter both have their children, but they're there every chance they get because we're grassroots people, and that's how it's always been on our reserve. When we don't toe the line, when we don't listen to them and partake in that vicious little circle, that jackass politics that they play, we get singled out. But we're in the process now of looking for a good lawyer, and we want, if we have to, we'll take this all the way to the United Nations, because we have basic human rights that tell us that, we should be allowed, contact with our grandchildren. Basic human rights that we are being denied. And we're to the point where, we're getting up there in age, and it's getting hard, to find support anymore. I guess we're like, we must be a great source of shame for them in some ways, because I guess what we show them is everything they gave up through the assimilation process, through that colonialism, all of those things that they gave up their language, they gave up their songs, their ceremonies. Most of them don't know how to hunt. Most of them don't know how to trap or fish. They're pitiful in those ways. And there's a few of us grassroots people left. The ones that are descendants of those hereditary bloodlines. We look at it, and all these years later, I spoke with my mom about it, and she said, we had no choice. Whether they liked us or not, whether they acknowledged us or not, true leaders, hereditary leaders, they don't forget the grandchildren. She said, we carried the language forward for them. We brought the songs and the ceremonies forward for them. We brought the customary practices of our people forward for them. We brought all the traditional ecological knowledge that we carry forward for the grandkids. So that's something I just want to remind the people about. And I want to send that message out there to the people, that there's still some of us who remember the old ways. There's still some of us who still go out there in the land and hunt and trap and fish and gather. And we're still close to the land. Like my grandmother used to say, we're still dreams of the land. We're not all gone. I want people to know that. And I want our people to stop being ashamed. I want them to quit looking at their shoelaces when somebody talks to them. I want them to be able to stand up and acknowledge their own title and rights to their own country, to their land, great vast territory that we own. Oh, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the political and social issues that are plaguing us grassroots people, the ones who carry the songs and ceremonies, the ones who fight hard to live a good life. Some of our greatest barriers are right within our own communities, some of our own people. I wish they would quit being ashamed of being to be who we are. I want them to know the beauty of being a dream of the land, to know that comfort. And if I can't get them to do it, maybe I can show their grandchildren someday, or these teachings. Somebody will take these teachings and pick them up and carry that forward, so the grandchildren will always have that. What it takes. All my relations.